Thank you very much. I recognize Honorable Breitenbach. Evening. I can see that you want to raise an issue. Over to you.
Yes, good evening, Honourable Chair. How are you?
I'm okay, and you?
Very well, thank you. The matter that I want to raise is a housekeeping matter. The program keeps changing at quite short notice, which I find somewhat disconcerting and concerning. I'm not sure why that is. None of our meetings appear on the Z list, and then we get these frankly odd times to sit. 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock every night in the week is, I find, very strange. Not that we're unwilling to work, not at all. But as everybody knows, I'm Jewish, and on Friday night from 6 o'clock is Shabbat. It is my Sabbath, and I find it extraordinary that Parliament would schedule meetings on the Sabbath. I'm of course available on Sunday, anytime, to sit, but none of the other members will be, because that's their Sunday. So if you don't sit on your Sunday, I don't see why you should sit on my Sunday. And so I have a difficulty with that, and I would like you to look into that matter, please.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Breitenbach. I think the challenge of changing programs, I think it's a challenge on my side.
Friday night from 6 o'clock
we
is
have been
Shabbat.
really trying to get times from the Parliament side, because we're trying to push as much as we can to ensure that by the time we start with a new term, which will be full of legislation. We would have pushed a lot of things. But I think we do take note of the issues we have raised. We'll try and improve on them. We will look at the issue that you have raised of the Jewish.
Thank you very much, Honorable Breitenbach.
What is this thing? A holiday on Friday. But I think the housekeeping matters, maybe we should deal with them after we've dealt with the issues today. Then we can deal with the housekeeping matters.
Times from the Parliament.
Is that fine, Honorable Breitenbach?
Because we're trying to push as much as we can.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Honourable Chair. May I also just mention that the Honourable Seldom is having difficulty joining the meeting. When he joins the Teams dashboard, he can't get in. It keeps asking him questions. Is there somebody who can assist him?
Committee Secretariat and Technician, can you attend to that?
Can somebody give him a call, Mr. Sel? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, before we start, let me also start by congratulating Advocate de Kock on his appointment as the Deputy National Director. Congratulations, Advocate de Kock. And also welcome the National Director, Advocate Batoi. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Honourable Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to the Chair, to the Minister. Sorry. I'll now hand over to the Minister to brief us.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. I was wondering why the Honourable Hisham insists on wearing his Palestinian mask in this meeting. But after
I just came in. So.
The apology by Honourable Breitenbach and her input, I now understand why he insisted on wearing the mask. Chairperson and
Honourable Minister, you're incorrect. The reason he wears the mask is he's much better looking with it on.
I understand why he insists on wearing it. So, thank you very much, Chairperson, and all members of the committee, and all our leadership of various departments in the umbrella of justice and correctional services and the entities, including the National Director of Public Prosecutions. and Advocate Skosana, the Acting Commissioner, Mr. Mkawela, and all the officials who are here with us, the DM from Justice, Mr. John Jeffrey, and I must state Honorable DM Olomisa. I spoke to him later today in this afternoon. He's in very good spirits, and he says he's recovering well. He is hoping to be back at work from next week, Monday, and we can only wish him the best, but he's in good spirit. Thank you, Chair, for the invitation to participate in this discussion to account on how the departments we are appointed to oversee are delivering services to the nation under a global pandemic environment. We continue to adapt to the new normal as a result of the COVID-19. Government continues to implore all South Africans to adhere to preventative measures, restrictions, and regulations so that they are protected from possible infections. President Ramaphosa has performed a delicate balancing act through cabinet by announcing the easing of lockdown restrictions, which government is implementing to create an environment for economic activities to resume. The easing of restrictions in no way suggests that we are a coronavirus-free nation. On the contrary, the numbers are increasing. It places a heightened responsibility on all of us as citizens to observe the required health protocols to mitigate the risk of transmission that can lead to a further resurgence of high numbers across the country. The departments in our ministry are also not spared of the effects of the COVID-19. Some of the courts were forced to close for decontamination purposes after positive cases were detected. Our correctional centers also continue to record positive cases for both officials and inmates. However, we have a comprehensive strategy in both departments which enable us to manage and treat the infections. To date, in the correctional services, we have recorded 1,485 recoveries, and we're currently attending to 497 active cases. Our sincerest condolences goes to the families of the 16 citizens in our centers who have since passed on as a result of COVID-19. In respect of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, we are still experiencing lower numbers, with 93 reported active cases and a total of 3. 2 magistrates and a court clerk have succumbed to COVID-19, and we also extend our sincere condolences to the families of the deceased. Honorable members, our mandate requires us to administer justice in the country, but also to ensure the incarceration of offenders. This means that we are constitutionally obliged to incarcerate inmates who have been lawfully sentenced by courts, irrespective of accommodation capacity at our disposal. The rate of imprisonment in our country for awaiting trial offenders is increasing at a rate which requires us to urgently interrogate the linkages in our criminal justice system. An analysis of our inmate population to date reveal our bed space in correctional services currently sits at 118,572, whereas we have a total of 149,330 inmates with 96,272 sentenced inmates and 53,058 remand detainees. In other words, honorable members, 55.1% of our inmates population are yet to have their day in court. These numbers cannot be viewed outside of the country's socio-economic conditions. Our prison population is largely constituted by those from disadvantaged backgrounds, more in particular young black males. Some are in our centers for economic crimes such as shoplifting, stealing, and robbery. There are also those who have committed heinous crimes. The high number of those in prison for economic crimes has prompted us to ask ourselves whether incarceration should be the only option at our disposal. We're asking this question cognizant of the fact that sentences for such crimes are short-term, thus resulting in sentence offenders not benefiting from effective rehabilitation programs in correctional centers. Put differently, short-term incarceration for such offenses do not give enough time for the correctional services system to reform and rehabilitate the offenders, particularly those who are serving less than 2 years in our facilities. We have a national overcrowding task team which works with regions and in management areas to manage overcrowding through a multi-pronged strategy. Overcrowding is a multi-dimensional challenge caused by various societal factors, which I have stated above. And the teams continue to work to help in terms of reductions of and the management in the centers. And the COVID-19 situation has made their job more urgent and pressing. In the next 5 years, as we stated in the previous discussion, we will create additional space of 3,000 bed spaces through upgrades and construction of new facilities. However, as I've said, experience has taught us that it is not possible for infrastructure projects to outpace the rate of conviction due to our high crime rate as a country. With regard to the remission and the parole dispensation, as honorable members will recall, on the 8th May 2020, we elaborated on special parole dispensation after His Excellency, the President, granted us an opportunity for parole for a selected categories of sentenced offenders. This was a measure to combat the spread of COVID-19 in correctional facilities, which are considered high-risk areas of infections by the World Health Organization and also the United Nations. And those who had committed violent crimes, sexual offenses, and other categories of crimes we have mentioned are excluded from these parole dispensations, as we have said. So far, Honorable Chairperson, we have only been able to release 3,557 inmates across the country, and none of them have been rearrested thus far. The breakdown of the release per region is as follows: Eastern Cape 275, Western Cape 825, Gauteng 678, Northern Cape and Free State 555, Limpopo, Northwest and Mpumalanga 490, KwaZulu-Natal 734. What causes the delay, Chairperson? You will remember the December remission, we were able to do it within time. But this one is difficult because the VOD, it's a very difficult process to do during this period of COVID-19. While we do try to use available technology, but when you engage a victim on this kind of a platform or on telephone, it's something very cold. The victims, they still preferred to be engaged physically. So this is creating a very difficult dimension in terms of the VOD process. And the second thing is the issue of the delay in taking the DNA samples, which have to be done, which is one of the requirements before they are released, because it's a very important measure to enable us to detect any other crimes, but also to have for in case they recommit offenses. It makes life easy for the South African Police Service to detect and investigate and be able to know who was involved in that kind of a crime. Hence, it is a requirement. But the fact that the SAPS itself is also hit by COVID-19. Ourselves also, our officials are also hit by COVID-19, including the parole boards, some of the members. All these compound the whole situation. It becomes different to the December one. Hence, all this delay. But we have recently appointed some of the parole board members, including substitutes, to help the process. So we are hopeful that the situation will improve, so that in case there are those that are affected at the time, there will be those that can be able to come in and help. Honorable members, with regards to the courts, we have developed and adopted a criminal case backlog plan, which provide guidelines for the management of backlogs in the criminal court rolls, which are exacerbated by the national state of disaster and the lockdown restrictions. Justice must continue to prevail under the COVID-19 circumstances. We are working with the judiciary and all relevant stakeholders to ensure that operations in the courts continue while observing regulations as gazetted. I must mention, Chairperson, that it is not easy for the courts to function, because even judicial officers themselves are scared of the in our facilities in the courts. Even some of the prosecutors, including some members of the Legal Aid South Africa, and also because they also have challenges with the issues of the inmates also coming, the issues of consultation. So all those combined also, they also affect this space. But this plan that has been developed, which has been agreed to by all the stakeholders, we believe that it will be able to help in the alleviation of the situation. Most courts have developed priority roles in conjunction with the National Prosecuting Authority, Legal Aid South Africa, and the legal representatives of the accused persons. This enables some of these courts to function. But as I've said, those challenges will always arise because people are still scared. We may also have to consider looking at the number of court hours, which is discussing. The new normal requires a new way of also doing things. And Chairperson, the department will further add on this aspect because it's a more difficult one and a complex one. Because of its involvement of various stakeholders, so that the role management and for the courts to function, including the technology that sometimes can be used. But it has been proven that the technology is more easily usable for remanding of cases and also for civil trials. But it's not. We are not yet in a situation where we can conduct a fully fledged criminal trial. As I conclude, Chairperson, I want to thank the honourable members for the engagements that we always have, which are sometimes also eye-opening for us. I will request the chair to allow the two departments to add a bit in some of the issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Who in the department is going to be presenting?
Mr. Katenga, you can advise whether it's Mr. Mkawele or it's yourself, and the Justice Mr. Skosana is there, the acting DG.
Okay. Let's start with Mr. Katanga. Katanga.
Thank you, Chair and Minister. I will request the my supervisor, the acting national commissioner, to delegate accordingly. And then where there are additional requirements or responses, the supporting team shall come in. So maybe if I can request the acting national commissioner to give guidance in that regard. Thank you, Chair.
As you are busy sorting yourself out, can we invite the acting DG Justice?
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Minister, Deputy Minister, honorable members, colleagues. I welcome this opportunity just to add on what the Minister have said. First, I would like to apologize. We circulated the document very late in terms of which provide the background, and also the NDPP and the NPA, sorry. I also appreciate the assistance in getting this plan off the ground. We circulated the document, and I know that it might have come a bit late, but I wanted to indicate that there was a meeting with the regional court presidents today over a plan, and I think measures are underway to implement the plan. The plan is very simple. When the minister published the directions on the 2nd of May, he basically provided that for every court, there must be a priority role. That role must take into account cases which ought to have been enrolled during the lockdown and basically were not enrolled because of the lockdown, and those cases which have been on the backlog roll over some time. And the enrollment of the case is formed by 5 principles. One, the priority role comprised of cases where accused persons are in custody. This will address the measures which the Minister have alluded to in terms of the challenges of infections in the correctional center. So inmates first accused in custody, that priority. The second one is with regard to the cases involving gender-based violence and femicide. As we've all know that it has become another serious concern, which the President have alluded to as the second pandemic to hit the country at the same time with the COVID-19. The third point is cases regarding corruption, which basically are corrupt matters that come from the ongoing investigations, as well as corruptions as it emanates from the procurement process under the PPEs arising from COVID-19 measures to prevent the spread. The fourth angle relates to cases involving children, because we all are aware that the children are basically need to be protected as well in our court system, etc. And then obviously is cases. The fifth category is cases where judicial officers basically feel that those cases are a priority. They must be on the priority role. Now it's simple. We've engaged the stakeholders, and the NPA and the Legal Aid Board were very contributive in this process, and we have dealt with the real clarity from the department side. The clerks of the court will draw all the cases which ought to have been on the case on the roll throughout the lockdown process, whatever. The ones which were postponed absentia, the ones which were not put on the roll because of the lockdown, they will then be drawn up and under the direction of the judicial head of a court. They will then be placed on the priority roll. Once they're on the priority roll, is then that there will then be trial preparation by the NPA, allocation of legal aid practitioners by Legal Aid South Africa, fast-tracking the investigation by SAPS, and obviously preparing for the correctional centers by correctional services, and also for the transportation of the inmates, whatever. So our meetings with all the relevant stakeholders basically helped in understanding what the responsibility of everyone, so that as and when those matters come into space, there's no chance of them being postponed. They basically be dealt with, so that we are able to make inroad into the backlogs which have come over the time, etc. There have been some statistics which have been collated and which are shared across all the sectors, etc. They are part of what we have presented, but those statistics on slide 7 of the report are basically moving targets, because there have been a slow uptake on the capturing side because of the rollout. Now, because colleagues, officials and clerk of the court have started to work full time, they are trying to push the update of those systems on our database, and we believe that that database should help all the stakeholders in the court environment to make sure that all cases that ought to be put in on the roll, they are being put in on the roll under the direction of the judicial head, with the support of the judiciary, with the involvement of legal aid, and obviously with the support of SAPS, etc. We know that some of the cases they need to be issued more new summonses because people are just not informed of the dates, they've been under lockdown, whatever. All that process will basically is starting to unfold, as the minister said. And I think there's already, in terms of these guidelines, there's already measures coming up from all the courts to make sure these cases find their way into the priority role. There's a challenge which I need to allude to as I conclude, is that Minister have alluded to the point that we are experiencing quite a number of challenges where courts have to close down because there have been a person who have been found to be COVID-19 positive. We have developed a draft protocol. We are consulting with, today I consulted the head of the judiciary. We are sending to the stakeholders to make their input. Basically, that protocol provides circumstances under which a court may be closed down, 2, the duration for which that court may be closed, 3, processes related to disinfecting, 4, alternative measures that need to be put into place during the closure, so that we don't basically experience challenges that they've experienced over the past in terms of the abrupt closure of the courts without communication to the end users, without witnesses and members of the public understanding what the issues are. So that protocol seeks to regulate those arrangements. I've engaged with colleagues in the other DGs in the health sector. We've aligned the protocol, the draft protocol, with the health protocol, with the health guidelines, so that we basically become upfront in terms of managing this process, which have become abruptly. To date, 68 courts have been closed since the start of the national lockdown because of the infections in the space. Now the protocol allows us to provide what we call the risk assessment exercise. So we are not only going to close the court because there was somebody positive, COVID positive in the court. Firstly, there must be an assessment whether that person in what space or floor of the court building he was or she was, and whether was the risk of that person having met a number of people, and who are those people, so that there are necessary contact tracing around the space, whatever. So we can cordon certain parts of the buildings, not everything. You can't close the whole building and whatever. So we'll be able with this protocol to identify which areas provide the greatest risk, which need to be closed, for how long, so that this infection can come into space and clean up that environment. Those measures are up and running in the holding cells, who are running deep cleaning sessions, etc., as and when inmates are changing tents in coming to those spaces, and all those are measures that are geared to minimize the spread of the virus across the society. And I think the ministers have given guidance in terms of the protocol. Deputy Minister was very helpful in terms of guiding that protocol must also ensure the improvement of the necessary hygiene measures, which should become part of our practice. Washing of hands, keeping a wet cloth with you, wiping your hands, and as far as possible, avoid touching circumstances and surfaces when it is not necessary. When you are forced to touch on the table, on the desk, on a accused dog, whatever, make sure that there's a wiping process so that those things are able to minimize the spread of those arrangements. But Honorable Chair, this is the detail of the plan which you have basically circulated, and now I will email the draft protocol, which we circulate this afternoon for the input of everybody, so that we can also get guidance from the members as well as from everybody, so that we all know how we should deal with these challenging circumstances when any of our employees, when any member of the public, when any of the inmates or members, court ordered or members of the subs who happen to be in the spaces in the courts gets infected of COVID-19. How do we deal with the circumstances in a manner that is orderly coordinated? Thanks, Chair, for the opportunity. And I should be able, I'm with the team here from Justice, Mr. Malema, Acting DDG, Court Services here, and Ms. Advocate Pikara, who has since taken over from the position of the retired Advocate Jurantis, also in the meeting, and Ms. Kola Kok in my office. And I think we should be able to respond to whatever matters that may come. And thank you everybody from the, as well as the NPA and the DCS for having been helpful in terms of preparing the necessary documentation for this meeting. Thanks, Minister and Deputy Minister and honorable members.
No, thank you very much, Acting DG. One thing I must register though, submission of documents, late submission of documents is not a ticking exercise. It's not a tick box exercise. We take it very seriously that documents are not submitted on time. And this is not for the first time. When documents are not submitted on time, you are affecting our ability to serve the people we are supposed to be serving, because we can't scrutinize, we can't oversight you properly. We don't take that kindly at all. That also applies to the Department of Correctional Services. To be bombarded a day before the meeting with a lot of slides is not acceptable. And going forward, we are not going to accept a situation where we get documents late. We are going to cancel those meetings and report the matter to the Speaker. It can't be acceptable. Correctional Services.
Honorable Chair and honorable members, honorable Minister and colleagues, let me allow Ms. Mlomondlovu to take us through the issue of overcrowding in terms of remand detainees, because in terms of the total overcrowding in the department, 118,000, and we are sitting at 196,000 in terms of offenders. The special remission that took place in December really decreased the number of sentence offenders, but we have seen an increase of remand detainees, and also what are the interventions that have been made so far in trying to reduce the number of the remand detainees. Over to you, DC Mlomondlovu.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, the honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, the Minister, the Deputy Minister, and the colleagues from the criminal justice system. I'm going to just summarize what we have done with regard to the reduction management of the remand detainees. It has to be understood that the population of remand detainees, we are sharing it with other stakeholders within the criminal justice system. So more than 80% of the remand detainees are detained without an option of bail. So which means those that we can try and reduce are the RDs with bail. So what we have done, we've been linking up with our partners, that is the Department of Justice, the NPA, by providing them with a name list of remand detainees so that they could assist us with the implementation of Section 63A and 63(1) of the Criminal Procedure Act. DCS also was submitting applications for 63A, which is the bail review, the application for bail review. So, Chair, the population of remand detainees, we've noticed that with the analysis that we have been doing during 2019, there has been a gradual increase, and the peak was in January where the population was 53,000. But the population started to go down. By April, the population was in 51,000. But due to COVID, during the month of April and up to the 5th of May, the population increased by more than 11%. On the 5th of May, the population was 57,000. But because we have been working, when we entered alert level 4 and alert level 3, we were included in the priority list that were the focus for the courts. So the population of remand detainees has been decreasing since the court started to open. That from the Department of Correctional Services, we've seen it through the J1s that we have been receiving from court, and some RDs that go to court who do not come back from the Department of Correctional Services. And as from the 20th of June, the population of remand detainees was able to reduce up to 52,000. There are some challenges that we are experiencing. In order to contain the COVID in our facilities, it was decided that the remand detainees should pay their bail in courts. We have been experiencing the problems that some of the RDs, when they go to courts, the courts were not really accepting that they pay there. But for the Department of Correctional Services, we have addressed this with the Department of Justice. So we hope that this matter will be resolved amongst ourselves, because at the same time, if we allow a lot of people to come to the Department of Correctional Services where we're already struggling with overcrowding, and we cannot even maintain the social distancing, it will increase the number of people that are likely to be COVID positive. So, Chair, from our side, that's all that I can say with regard to the remand detainees. Thank you, Chair.
Is that all, Commissioner, Acting Commissioner?
Yes, thank.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Chair. We have just two presenters, Mr. Nesingane, then Mr. Lakim Tekwa, on the overall management of overcrowding in the department. Mr. Nesingane will present to the committee the measures that we have put in place and the readiness in terms of the 19,000 parolees that are being released in terms of the special parole dispensation. Over to you, Mr. Nesengane.
Thank you, Acting National Commissioner. First, I want to appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Minister, Deputy Minister, Chairperson, members of the Portfolio Committee, and colleagues. Let me indicate that the Department of Correctional Services is prepared to accommodate 19,000 parolees and probationers who will be released through special parole dispensation. We have 218 offices all over the countries that are ready to cater for that. And these offices have got satellites, and those satellites are ready to monitor compliance in relation to our parolees and probationers. And it is very much important to indicate that the department is ready based on the fact that the remission has unburdened it in relation to some of the parolees. Before the remission, we were 71,528, and therefore after remission, we are actually 56,632. But looking at the personnel, the same personnel which we were dealing with, which was 1:29. Therefore, the special parole dispensation does not have much of an impact in relation to our personnel. And therefore, our personnel are ready to deal with that issue based on that particular issue. It is important also to indicate that we are currently, as I indicated, 1:30 per day. And therefore, in relation to to personnel. We've got 1,854 personnel entrusted with the monitoring of parolees and probationers. Even though, as I would have to indicate that we have suspended your low and medium risk physical monitoring, we are monitoring, but monitoring through telephone. It is very important to even indicate that, yes, COVID-19 has had an impact even in our offices in such an extent that as we were busy releasing these 19,000, we had some of our officials in some offices who became positive and offices had to be closed, as indicated by the minister. For an example, Joburg, that had 24. Therefore, but anyway, this did not impact on our monitoring because we are monitoring the maximum, and we have provided all our monitoring officials with the PPEs, personal protective equipment, in order to those who are conducting physical monitoring. Minister, the portfolio committee, and I would like to indicate that VOD is still suspended until level 2, but that will be reviewed based on what the National Commissioner, the acting National Commissioner, has indicated about the visits to our institution. Restorative justice has been suspended because when you do this, conduct these particular processes telephonically, you lose what we call your rapport, your working relationship with the victims, and they don't trust us. Therefore, we're waiting to review that when we review the visit to our institution, so that we start engaging in this victim offender dialogue and restorative justice. Minister, Deputy Minister, and the Portfolio Committee, I think mine will end there, and I will await for questions to be posed in relation to the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. Over to you, Mr. Mthethwa.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, and members of the Parliament. Mine is going to be just wrapping up. My apology, I couldn't connect at that point in time, but I can just wrap up regarding the management of overcrowding, as we already been informed based on our mandate, which is to rehabilitate offenders in safe and humane conditions while observing their dignity. Of course, quickly getting into the essence of where we are, going through the context that we have here, I thought I must just indicate the overview of where we are and what are the issues that we have. And I believe the Acting National Commissioner have already taken us from June last year until June the 23rd, where we are in terms of overcrowding. Safe to say we are at 125.16%. And of course, we are all aware that even though there are multi-pronged strategy that we have, with the bed spaces that is about 118,000, we still have some challenges that we are facing. Of course, it's a success of the criminal justice system to arrest the convict, resulting in an increase of the inmate population. And of course, the inherited infrastructure that we have that does not necessarily address our rehabilitation, hence reducing this. And of course, we are also faced with the sentencing policy regime that we have, which is the minimum sentencing regime that caused this increase of overcrowding into our facilities. And of course, among others, is unprecedented increase of the remand detainees, as it was indicated due to COVID regulation. I'm talking about not complying with them, among other things, and of course, the impacting on our human resource due to COVID-19, where our members had to go for quarantine and isolation. That impacted us on that, but we are safe. And of course, happy to announce that the special remission of sentence that was provided to us as the Department of Correctional Services, of course, the Minister playing a very good role there. We have seen the granting of the special remission of sentence during 2012, during December, where a number of those qualifying was, in fact, assisting us in terms of that. And of course, the COVID-19 special parole dispensation of about 19,000. And of course, we are seeing a reduction there. We can confirm as of yesterday, we've got about 3,726 that has since been reduced. Of course, I have to indicate that based on the schedule that we are utilizing to place out those that are qualifying. We're talking about the low risk. We are at week number 7 as we speak right now. Of course, we should have been having more if we didn't have some challenges that we are currently having, but they are all being addressed. Going quickly to the issue that also hampers our trying to reduce this, the total number of those that are not qualifying. I'm talking about those that are in for serious crimes, who are in maximum facilities. We can confirm we've got about 57 of such maximum facilities where they do not qualify. They didn't qualify either for the special remission of 2019 during December, neither for special parole dispensation. So that reflects to a percentage of about 23.63% of such. And they are in for a very long time. And those centers, of course, they are over 150%. And I have to indicate that now what do we do then going forward? Of course, we have since realized that we might not necessarily meet the due date, which we have set for ourselves for about 10 weeks to finish and finalize the special remission or the special parole dispensation, which had to run for over a period of 10 weeks. But we have since requested an extension operational so that we can address the issues, as I've already indicated. The COVID-19 had an impact on our officials because they had to go on quarantine. And of course, that also includes the parole boards and members of the community. And regarding the overcrowding generally in the management thereof, of course, we are utilizing the multi-pronged strategy with an understanding that if we all work in an integrated manner with other sister departments, we are going to be winning this battle going forward. And of course, Chair, I'm not going to take you through the state patients that we have, which is about 196, and we are having some programs that are related, tailor-made to suit their needs within our facilities, while the Department of Health is assisting us with the transfer of such to those relevant mental health care facilities. But in the meantime, we provide those programs that are tailor-made, as I indicated, to suit them. And of course, we have presented, or we are presenting as well, the children that we have in our facility that are not that many. I have to indicate that also includes mothers with babies within our facilities that we have. And we have to indicate that even them, we are managing them accordingly. And there are about 96 in number, with the majority being in KZN, and then followed by Free State and Northern Cape. Mothers with babies, we've got about 55 all in all, and majority being in Gauteng. And all of them, of course, they are being taken care of within our facilities in terms of our policies and procedures. Of course, lastly, we have in managing structure of the overcrowding in terms of the multi-pronged strategy, we have the regional or the north, which is the National Overcrowding Task Team that is managed nationally. In the region, we've got the Regional Overcrowding Task Team, which we call it a ROD. And in the management areas, of course, we have management area National Task Team that facilitate the reduction of the number following all the protocols that we have. And of course, as I've already indicated, we have that kind of a breakthrough at this point in time, which I can confirm is just a temporary relief, because the overcrowding will go down and then you find next time it is up. But we are monitoring it, and with a trust that our sister department is going to assist us in an integrated manner to address the overcrowding in terms of the multi-pronged strategy that were approved in 2006. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I will now hand over to the Minister. Is there anyone else you want to make an input before we open for questions?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if the NDPP may want to add anything, but yeah.
Minister, no, thank you. We contributed to Justice presentation. We are happy to take questions.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have the following hands: Honorable Glenis Breitenbach, followed by Honorable Horn, followed by Honorable Nivot Drechans, and then followed by Honorable J.K. Mofokeng. In that order, Honorable Glenis Breitenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I put the camera on, it affects my signal, so I'm switching it off. Yes, there is a gentleman. This is for the minister. There's a gentleman in Swellendam. He was released on early parole, and I'm told it was as part of the COVID-19 releases. His name is Sergio Jonkers. He was released on the 22nd of June. He was sentenced to 5 years after being convicted of culpable homicide for some obscure reason, having strangled his distant cousin, one Francois Yankees, and then attempted to conceal the crime by dumping the body in a river in 2018. He was sentenced early this year, January or February, and now he's wandering around the town of Swellendam. The big family of the victim and the young child of the victim, the deceased, were not contacted. No discussions were held with him. And one morning they got up to find this fellow wandering around their town. Now, is it so that he was released? And I don't expect you to have the answer now. I'd like it in writing. Is it so that he was released as part of the COVID-19 releases? And if so, since when did this type of crime become a petty or a minor offence? And why were no discussions held with the family? And why were they left to discover 4 months after the murder of their family member, or 4 years after the family murder, and 2 years after the murder and 4 months after the sentencing, this person wandering around their town? If you could get back to me on that, please. And then I'd like to know what the position is in relation to the proposed directives with regards to courts under level 3, please. There seems to be some sort of mismatch going on. Some have been withdrawn, others not. Nobody seems to know what's going on. What is the proposed plan to deal with the increased backlog? How will it be decreased? I saw the presentation, and I see with some concern on slide 12, and perhaps the NPA can answer this question, that one of the suggestions is the optimum use of plea bargaining. So it's been some time since I left the NPA, but there were quite strict rules with regards to plea bargaining when I was there. Are those rules still in place? Plea bargaining is not for the faint of heart. It needs to be managed correctly. Has there been proper training? Are there enough prosecutors who are sufficiently experienced enough for this optimized use of plea bargaining? You've told us, Minister, how many people have now been released. What protocols were employed to ensure their safety and the safety of the community that they're being released into prior to their release? What was the state of overcrowding prior to the releases? And what is it currently? How much has it been improved? What measures were put in place to ensure that community corrections were adequately resourced in order to deal with the releases and the planned future releases? Prior to this, community corrections were woefully under-resourced, certainly not capable of dealing with the job that they had to do. If they're going to be flooded with these releases, how are you going to make sure that they're in a position to do their job? Then again, with regards to the backlog, it looks like that there's been a considerable spike in particularly district court backlog. almost 17,000 cases, and in the regional court, just over 4,000 cases. These numbers are extremely concerning, deeply concerning. There's already a lot of problems dealing with the backlog. It's not getting worked down by any significant measure. What are we going to do with these? And is the spike as a result of arrests and prosecutions for COVID-related offences? At some point, I don't expect it to be available tonight, but at some point, I think the committee should be furnished with a breakdown of the COVID-related cases, which of them can be regarded as petty, and which are more serious percentage-wise. So I understand the big corruption cases, and then perhaps also while everyone's here tonight, they can give us an update on what the position is with regards to the 230,000 people who were charged or fined with regards to the COVID-related offences, and paid. How many of them paid admissions of guilt, and what is going to be done about the fact that they now have a criminal record? It's a deeply concerning state of affairs, and we really do need to address it. Then during 2018-2019, Correctional Services said that 8 correctional centres had been closed for renovation and repairs. What's the progress on those 8? When are they coming online? Swellendam and Brandvlei Maximum were closed as a result of dilapidation. Whatever that may mean, and how a prison gets into the state where it has to be closed as a result of dilapidation, I don't know. But what was the offender population in those 2 centres? Where have they gone to, and what are the plans for these 2 facilities? I'll stop there. If there's anything that's not covered, I'll come back to it. Thank you.
Honourable Horn.
Thank you, Chair, and also for the sake of let's say a better quality sound, I'll also, with your permission, leave my video off. Chair, firstly, I'd like to inquire from both departments, but specifically the Department of Justice, if have no special expertise regarding finances, but if I read the special budget and the adjustments announced by the Minister of Finance correctly this afternoon, Justice will be faced with a 262 million rand budget cut, and then there's a 284 million rand environment built into the Justice budget. So if we could be appraised at this stage as to what extent have the department started planning incorporating this cut, specifically given the fact that if plans for case backlog management are to materialize, logic will inform that there may be additional expenses incurred to implement such a plan. And then if I understand the DCS situation correctly, there's no net cut. There's a 416 million rand cut, which is then added by way of the COVID-19 appropriation, and a 484 million rand environment. So if we could be appraised as well at this early stage as to whether the department is already busy and what projects, if any, are impacted. Then, Chair, turning to firstly DCS, I would like to inquire in respect of the 19,000 inmates to be released on the special parole, how many of them have qualified by way of the criteria set by the Minister of having passed their minimum detention period or will approach this period in the coming 5 years, because they've now benefited twice within the space of 6 months from a special dispensation. So last year on the 16th of December, there was announced a special remission by the president, and then the minister made a speech in which he indicated that there was just less than 15,000 inmates in the centers at that stage who would receive a discount of between 12 and 24 months in respect of their sentencing periods. So I would like to have the details as to how many of the 19,000 that either have been released or are to be released ultimately find themselves in that beneficial position because they were able to double dip into 2 special remissions. Then in respect of the presentation, Chair, and specifically slides 25 and 26 regarding the, let's say, the preparations of DCS and the way DCS is going to manage this release, I must say, and I would really like to have the comment of both DCS and the minister that this presentation seems to be self-contradictory. On the one hand, it says that stringent measures have been put in place to manage this. The minister has assured South Africa that these people are not released unconditionally. They're to remain part of the system. But then if we look carefully into the presentation, it really is clear that for all practical purposes, they are going to be released into society without being part of the system. And the reason why I say this is that in the words of the presentation, they are mostly low and medium risk inmates. During level 3, which is currently in place, and we don't have dates for level 2 yet, no monitoring of low and medium risk parolees is going to take place. I have it also, and it's not part of the presentation, but I have it on authority that also as part of the COVID-related measures, community corrections are not undertaking any reintegration programs with parolees. So that would mean that on the version of the DCS itself, the only way by any stretch of the imagination, the bulk of these 19,000 to be released will be part of the system is if there is this telephonic monitoring. And with the greatest of respect, I don't think telephonic monitoring will be worth the paper that the report is going to be written on. There's simply no way you can ascertain where a parolee is physically at that stage. There's no way you can ensure that you are talking to the parolee. So this is really worrying, Chair. And in line with that, I think the department telling us constantly that the majority are to be low and medium risk releases. I think at this stage we as a committee must also ask for a detailed breakdown so that we can have a clearer picture as to who are being released. Then lastly, in respect of DCS, or second lastly, sorry, the number of 1,854 officials within community corrections are stated, and then based on that, we told that there's a ratio of 1 to 30. But I want to ask specifically whether the 1,854 are monitoring officials, because it is also so that within community corrections you have human resource officers, you have logistical officers, you have secretaries, you have office managers, you apparently even have transport officials. So I think we need the detail as to how many of the 1,854 are working on a day-to-day basis with monitoring of parolees. And then lastly, in respect of DCS, Chair, in respect of overcrowding, it is quite clear that certain of the management regions, and specifically the Eastern Cape, which has been plagued by also the COVID-19 amongst both officials and inmates, still sit, despite the national average of 125%, still sit with centers overcrowded by more than 200%. Now, I would have thought if the rationale behind the release of 19,000 prisoners was to ease overcrowding, then parallel to that, there obviously must be a program of action to redistribute sentenced offenders so that the 125% is more or less not only an average, but also nearer to the reality in all regions and across all centers, specifically during this time when no visits are allowed. So the whole objection historically behind moving sentenced offenders to centers further from their home base can't apply during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I would like to know whether that is also parallel to the release taking place. Otherwise, despite the releases, we may still sit with centers which really could be bushfires in terms of spreading the virus when it gets there. Then, Chair, in respect of the case backlog plan of Department of Justice, I think we must say that this, rather than a plan, still very much looks like a work in progress. I understand and I have sympathy, and I agree with the whole priority role issue at this stage. But to state that you're having a plan if you say that you are considering longer hours, it clearly indicates that there's really no plan yet. The minister at the start of his presentation said we're adapting to a new normal. And if the new normal is going to be like, I again read today that we can expect to have further waves of this pandemic for months and years to come, then the new normal obviously must be that we must now get to a plan which we can implement despite. And into the plan must be worked in the factor that courts have a likelihood to be closed down temporarily because of infections. So when I think of a plan, I think the only real way we can say that this is a workable plan is if it works with the numbers. So previously, the Deputy Minister has appraised us as to how the backlog roll has grown. The presentation only has the figures up to the 26th of May. We're now nearly at the 26th of June, but the plan must work with numbers. The plan must have targets as to in each court how their specific backlog will be dealt with, and ultimately must be filtered down to every courtroom. Otherwise, it's simply not a plan that can be implemented. So I would very much like the department to finalize this plan. And then come back to the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Honourable Dragons.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to everybody and good evening to everybody. So the question well, firstly, the minister mentioned the parolees, the 3,000 odd who have already been released. So I would like to know which dates were they released? What are the when were they released? The reason I ask this is that here in the Western Cape, it was said that crime has spiked because of the parolees released and the special dispensation. So I'm a bit puzzled that it sounds like the figure that you mentioned is really low, but what has been in the media here in the Western Cape is a figure around the 6,000s. So I'm quite curious about, when they were released and, this number, this difference in number, and were they released during lockdown or the correctional centers? And are they being monitored at community corrections? Excuse me. So the previous honourable members have covered me about the 19,000, but I'd just like to add, if you could perhaps provide us with a breakdown provincially of the parolees. And also perhaps if the Department of Correctional Services, if they have a plan in terms of releasing the full 19,000, because what I read in the media is giving us an impression that almost all of the parolees have been released, and the information that I get here is quite different. And then Honorable Breitenbach has already covered me about the Western Cape, but also in relation to that question, the bed space here in the Western Cape, in 2 centres in the Western Cape, Brandvlei and Swellendam, you know, how many bed spaces will be there in each centre? I'd like to know that. And one more question from my side. A correctional centre in Gauteng, and the overcrowding there is well beyond 200%, if I'm not mistaken. And the beds are 2,000, but the prisoners there are about 6,000. So the number of beds is about 2,680, but the actual prisoners there are over 6,000, so 6,480. And that's well beyond 246% in terms of accommodation overcrowding. So what is the plan from the department to decrease that percentage, particularly in that centre, because it's well over the 150%, and it seems like the department has not managed to decrease overcrowding in that centre. Thank you very much, Chair.
Honourable Mufokeng.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentations. Chair, I want to start where Honourable Velma left about the 6,000. I'm actually a little bit disturbed because the 2 members of the DA, I would understand that they will know where about the province, because their MEC, who came in public to say 6,000 people are released out of the 19, are the ones that are causing a mess of domestic violence, robbery, guns, and whatever you call them. Now, I want them to actually, to the Minister and the Department of Correctional Service, to can understand where does it come from, because I will expect that it's the police that will tell them that we have actually arrested people. If we can be clarified on the 6,000, and listening to the number of 19,000, it looks like you haven't finished the 19,000 out. Can we have a breakdown of provinces into how many people are out to date? Then the next one will be on the issue of the state pensions. The state pensions, I just heard that you have programs. Can we have a list according to the agenda? And having the list according to the agenda, also understand that on the 196 you are having, the programs you are giving out or helping them with for rehabilitation or being better, because these are mental patients and they should be cared for, because also they need to be reunited with their families if they are in the categories of those that can be looked as parolees. Do you have any in the list? If there are, how many? Now, looking at the issue of the national prosecution, I sympathize with the department knowing that they've been having their backlogs, but I'm very worried because we have learned that there's a lack of uniformity in the regions regarding the manner in which pending cases are being dealt with. Can we be clarified, is it true or not? And because we know that you've been dealing with integrated case backlog management plan. Now in that, you had to look at several cases, and you said relating to cases like corruption, sexual offenses, GBV, serious crimes and whatever, robbery or murder, that you'll be making sure that you prioritize them. But now that you have 68 courts closed, we are on level 3. What is it that you're going to do? Because it looks like the plan on level 4 it's already going to be adding on the backlog. Then the last question, if not the second one, will be on the issue of can we have the breakdown on cases prior to lockdown? How many did we have, especially on corruption, fraud, and all those prioritized cases? Because one is aware that we have cases that are over 10 years of corruption. We will come out now to say that cases of corruption are going to be prioritized, only to find that there will be 10 years also. Can we have a list of how many of over 10 years? Where are they? And what is their status? Noting that also when people talk about we don't even do our management right in terms of performance, whether it's a magistrate or it's a prosecutor, the problem is going to be the issue of sometimes you even promote magistrates and prosecutors that are having cases sitting with them for over 10 years. So can we understand on those, Chair? I think I will leave it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Mohammed.
Thank you, Chairperson, for the opportunity. Honorable Jackie Mofokeng largely covered me, but let me zoom a bit further into that issue about the 19,000 in specifics. You know, Minister, on the 8th of May, you announced the special dispensation on the release of certain category of low-risk sentence offenders who qualified, as you pointed out, and that excluded a number of categories. For example, lifers, sexual offenders, murder, attempted murder, gender-based violence, etc. Now, in the Western Cape where we're operating, where I'm deployed, as pointed out earlier by Honorable Mofokeng, there's a specific MEC as well as a councillor. In fact, I can name the councillor, Councillor Angus Mackenzie. And the reason I'm naming him because there's a video, Minister, circulated quite widely in the media as well as social media, where he directly says that 19,000 inmates have already been released. One, two, that 6,000 of those are in the Western Cape. Now, I think it's important for the department to clarify this issue in the interest of the public, because there's been a lot of queries around this particular issue. So if Minister can just clarify this particular issue, which has been published in this past week in the area. Also, the overcrowding in the excess of 25.94%, according to the presentation here. Could we just get a clarity on the bed space as is current? We know the amount of inmates; those are sentenced and unsentenced in the correctional facilities. But if we can just get an idea of what the capacity challenge is as far as bed space is concerned. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Janche.
Comrade Chair, thank you very much. I'll be very brief, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief, Chair, partly covered by the previous speakers, so I'm not going to repeat questions that they've raised. I just thought maybe to start in this way because I'm going to focus on especially on this overcrowding thing. This is a matter we've dealt with in our short space of time in last year already, and we were presented with a strategy by the ministry and the department about how they'll go about dealing with overcrowding. And I even remember being specific and took one case, which was St. Albans, which kind of was raised even in the House. And what was presented by the minister was a strategy of how they're going to deal with this. Now, when I've received this presentation, so I had to ask myself a question as to what verdict is the minister bringing on overcrowding and his department on this issue, because there are about 6 or 8 areas of benchmark that they linked to the issue of overcrowding, because that overcrowding was worsening the bed space, was affecting maintenance, health conditions, exacerbating gang activities, worsening safety issues. But the biggest of those was that the issue of rehabilitation was not possible to be done because of overcrowding. Now, what has been presented to us, Minister, is that today, a few months later, with the strategy that you introduced, that capacity cannot match the intake. The capacity that you have cannot match the intake or the demand. Now, I'm left with the question as to, if you take out the COVID influence kind of action about the 19,000 and look at the progress on overcrowding, I'm not able to see what progress has been made on overcrowding. If I take out that strategy spoke on many other elements, and I'm missing many of those. What has been brought to us is just, we now are hinging onto this possible 19,000 as part of the response to COVID-19. Seems that you've forgotten about everything else, or you did not do anything else, which you presented to us that this is how you're going to, this is a plan of how you're hitting on this issue of overcrowding. I really am asking that question, means that take us through, just take us in confidence as to, are we having progress on attending to this issue of overcrowding, or are we still having challenges? Because the 150,935, with now we're talking about 149,000, that's national. It looks like a very tiny opportunistic intervention than it being part of an overall systematic plan of dealing with overcrowding. Please indicate what is the issue. Are we moving from where I'm sitting? I think we're not moving on this issue of overcrowding at all. That's really my first question, Chair, and and my main question was, I wouldn't want to go any further. I can deal with some of the specific issues which will not mean much unless such a question is answered. I am interested, for example, in the Eastern Cape, you have this area called Beggersdorp with 149 capacity. You have 256 beds of remand detainees, 144 sentence, and it's over by 268% over its capacity. I know Beggersdorp is a small farming town. Unfortunately, your report does not have a breakdown, firstly, of that inmate population. Which areas does it come from? What are the sentences and offenses that includes that? And such a breakdown would be needed. I think Honorable Breitenbach raised the issue as well, even in other areas, because I think what we have is not very much helpful. And if I had to go to St. Albans, the one that we dealt with last year, with lots of problems, and it's, you're talking about capacity of 700, and you have 1,000, almost 500 remand detainees and 41 sentence. It seems that it's now being utilized, and Albans is utilized mainly for remand detainees. And I don't know what is the criteria and the decision around that. And if I can go back later on the Model B, which is another crisis area in terms of this, with a capacity of just 2,500. It's at 163% kind of capacity. Many of these are well beyond the 150% capacity, which is a directive, which when you brought the strategy, it was aimed at how you want to attend to that. And so with everything else that has been said, as I conclude, I'm only asking one question, really, are you in a position to say to us, we're making progress on overcrowding? Or should we be rethinking about a new approach? Or should we just be saying we're not able to deal with this animal? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. I see Honorable Bredenbach is struggling with the connectivity there. I'm not sure about how far she is from where I stay, so it could be helpful so that we also see her nicely.
Where do you stay?
In Waterkloof. I think we are not staying far from each other. So
I'm
she
in
can
Cape Town.
easily come. Oh, you're in Cape Town. I thought you were here.
Where
No,
now?
that's fine. So, Chairperson, I will request that we allow the officials to respond. We can start with the correctional services and then justice.
Yeah, please remember those who are proposing marriage that we are also commissioners of oath who can officiate. Over to you, officials of the departments. Let's start with correctional services.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. With regards to overcrowding, we are really dealing with this challenge. However, we should also bear in mind that we are receiving sentenced offenders on daily basis and remand detention offenders on daily basis. For example, there in Joburg, 27 courts are sending offenders to medium B. And this center that we are talking about that is having 6,000, it's medium A in Joburg, it's remand detainee that are brought by SAPS to our facility. As we implement our 8-pronged strategy, we move offenders around for equal distribution in our centers, but we continue to receive offenders and remand detainees in large numbers. But however, the strategies that we're implementing are mainly about even distribution in terms of the capacity that we have. And we do have maximum sentenced offenders that are not easy to move to other centers that are not designed to incarcerate a maximum offender. With regards to remand detainees, it is impossible to move those remand detainees from Joburg and detain them somewhere else because they attend courts around Joburg area. But I will hand over to Mtetwa to talk to the issue of the bed space, then also to Dr. Botha to talk to the 8 correctional centers that were closed, also talk about Brownfly and Swellendam, then also Mr. Nisingani the capacity of community corrections, looking at the 1,854 officials that we have, as to whether those officials are just for monitoring purposes. Then the other issues that we are going to supply or put them in writing as responses. The issue of the breakdowns of the people that were placed on the special parole dispensation. Then Mr. Mtetwa will also give us the numbers as to how many parolees have been placed on parole since the beginning of the special dispensation on parole. But I can say, honorable members, that the 6,000 number of the Western Cape is not true, but Mr. Mtetwa will talk to that. Over to you, colleagues, Mr. Mtetwa, Director Botha, and Mr. Nesengane. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Chair. I think I am audible now. I'm going to do exactly that, Honorable Minister, Deputy Minister, and colleagues. Firstly, I want to talk about the St. Albans matter. I think I am audible. I want to talk about St. Albans matter. I can confirm, Chair, that in St. Albans, we've got not only one facility, we've got medium A, medium B in that area, as well as remand facility. We checked the figures as per presentation were presented. Of course, we are over 200, it's 216.29%. And I can confirm that the bed spaces that were meant for that particular area, it's 706. So we have exceeded that, hence we are at 1,527. So the percentage, so I can confirm, as it has been by the acting national commissioner, we do not have basically control of the remandees. Hence, as I indicated in the presentation, majority of the facilities that are over 200, as reflected here in the presentation, that is where we've got remand facilities. And Susu said clearly on those. And when you also check generally, the overview of our inmate population, we are seeing a decrease of the sentence significant, which indeed the special remission of sentence, which includes the COVID dispensation, had a significant impact on it, which is a positive one, which one can indicate. I wanted just to quickly start just right there, of course, with the exception of the remand facilities. Quickly going to the issue that has just been raised. Of course, I can confirm, as the acting national commissioner indicated, the presentation that I've presented or I reflected here talks about the placement of parole for those low-risk offenders who are qualifying for the placement under the COVID special parole dispensation. I said, as dated the 19th of the 6th, of course, we have a date for today. I can give the total of 3,557. That is confirmed. 3,557. The breakdown, as it has been requested by the members of the committee, I can confirm that for Eastern Cape, we had 275. Gauteng is 625. KZN is 787. LMN is 490. Free State and Northern Cape is 555. And then lastly, Western Cape is 825. So that is the figure, 3,557 dated the 19th of 6/2020. Of course, I indicated we are placing them out, those that are of course benefiting out of this. We've got a figure as dated the 23rd, I beg your pardon, which is yesterday, and I have a figure here in front of me that says we have placed out 3,875 as the 23rd of June. Out of that, of course, we've got 3,570, that is your males, and the females is 305. I can confirm that. Now, concerning another question that was asked regarding the state patients, whether do we have those that have been released or benefited out of the COVID-19 special parole dispensation? Chair, we can just verify that, but I can confirm that majority of the state patients, they are serving or they are in, because some of them in the main, they are still under remand facilities. There are crimes that they've allegedly committed. There are serious crimes. It includes your GBVs, it includes your murder, rape, and so on and so on. So for that specific statistics, if we can be given an opportunity to go and check, we will gladly appreciate that. Regarding the capacity challenge, there was a question which says we need to confirm the capacity to approved accommodation we have vis-a-vis the 150 that we have just been mentioned. Of course, I can confirm we've got 118,572 that we are having at this point in time. And of course, the acting DC facilities will talk about those facilities that are still under renovation, and there are 6 in number. Regarding the Brandflay and Swellendam bed spaces, if I can be given an opportunity, I will definitely get back to the chair because I have the figures here in front of me. I will quickly check that, Chairperson. Quickly checking whether there is any other matter that is not yet responded to. Of course, the issue of us, what it is that we are doing to address overcrowding. I've correctly indicated, and the Acting National Commissioner alluded to that. We've got the multi-pronged strategy, out of which we have 8-pronged strategy within the multi-pronged strategy. This multi-pronged strategy is having 8 dimensions, as we have presented before. These 8 dimensions, those are the ones that we are utilizing to ensure that we address overcrowding. And for the sentence category, of course, we are inclusive of the evenly distribution of the offenders, those that are sentenced. Of course, remandees were using the Criminal Procedure Act, which is what we indicated earlier on. There we can't shift them, but we have to do or submit the applications to call for such. That is Section 63A, Section 63(1), as it has been mentioned. And of course, it's quite a variety of the dimensions that, if I can go, one by one, perhaps it might play the honorable chairperson. But of course, we have to confirm that we do have the challenges, as I earlier indicated. The success rate within our criminal justice to prosecute, of course, they add a number in terms of those that are supposed to be brought within our care. And we indicated earlier on during the overview that the inherited infrastructure that we have currently is also providing some limitations for us to can maneuver in terms of rehabilitating the offenders. And of course, lastly, the sentence policy regime, which is the minimum sentencing, is also limiting us, as it is bringing in people that are going to be in for a very long time. Hence, we have 57 of such maximum facilities where they are over 150%. That on its own give us really a challenge. And of course, we have to talk about the COVID-19 arrests that we have. That also add to what we are trying to do, that is trying to create social distancing under those. But it is confirmed that indeed, the special remission of sentence, inclusive of the special parole dispensation, had a significant number. And I indicated earlier on, is a temporary relief, because we will obviously see an increase while South Africa is hard in ensuring that crime in South Africa is dealt with. Chair, if I can pause there, perhaps I can come back at a later stage. Thank you.
But I think the question was whether all your strategies are working. Is there any impact that we can see? I think that was the issue raised by Honorable Judge.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I was going to make that follow-up. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I can quickly respond to that. I can confirm that not all of them, of course, they are making an impact due to the challenges that I've just been talking about. Like we have indicated, we've got 8 of them, and all majority of them, of course, they are dependent on the value that is added by other role players at sister departments. Of course, with the exception of those that are sentenced, but the remandees, we are fully dependent on the police having to arrest for prosecution, not to prosecute perhaps for people that will be kept within our care for a very long time. So that is where we are, and not on sentence category, but on the remandees. That's wherein we have this kind of a challenge, Chairperson.
What about people who have been found guilty of very minor offenses and they are not in a position to pay bail or to pay those fines?
Certainly, Chair, that's another very important question that we are raising. Indeed, it does, but it is within our 8 dimension that I was talking about. Within the first dimension, that is the management of the remand detainees. That is where there is a challenge. And of course, there are those that do not have support systems. Of course, even though they qualify to be placed out, but their systems is lacking. Then limiting us with no option but to keep them within our facility. And I do believe that one, in the main, is this because of the social ills within our communities, Chairperson.
Minister, you might need to look at this issue. I'm not convinced that the answers we are getting convinces us that we are on top of the issues.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of number crunching, but I'm not sure that we're on top of issues.
Yeah, noted, Chairperson. I'm not sure, Mr. Mukabele, are you done? Must we now move to Skosana? I think there are lots of questions asked by Honorable Horn related to community corrections that I think are not answered.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. I guess, Mr. Mkavela, the Acting National Commissioner has indicated that after Mr. Mtetwa, I was going to answer in relation to COMCO, to community corrections. I would like to indicate very clearly that as I have shown, that before the remission, we were on the same number of 1,854, which of course we had a population of 71,000 plus. Therefore, currently we are at 56,632 with the same number of personnel that we have. And therefore, that shows that when we have this 19,000 released, we're reverting back to that 71,000 plus, which of course is not going to be a major hiccup in relation to dealing with the 19,000, because we would have gone to the normal population that we had before, as I have indicated. And in relation to the case of the breakdown, let me be very clear to say the personnel in community corrections, all of them, they do monitoring.
The only thing that you will need to indicate is that some do it at a specific time, but all of them, they do monitoring compliance in relation to conditions to all parolees and probationers. Thank you. I would, if you need those breakdown, those who do double, then we would be able to do that in writing at a later stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Director Potter.
Good evening, Honourable Chair, Honourable Minister, Honourable Deputy Minister, Honourable committee members and colleagues. Honourable Chair, thanks for the opportunity to present regarding the questions in terms of the centres that has been closed due to dilapidation. Chairperson, as the Honourable Minister also indicated during his opening address, is that as part of the infrastructure plan, some of those centres that's currently closed will be reopened within the next 5 years in terms of the plans. I will start with the first one, Honourable Chairperson. In terms of Brandvlei is one of the correctional centres in the Western Cape with a bed space capacity of 690 bed spaces. Currently, it is closed. In terms of the project execution plan, we anticipate to have that facility refurbished within this next 5 years, but the due date is in 2022. I can also indicate that currently we're in a process, it's already in tender for the refurbishment and repair of 100 bed spaces. So in terms of that project, we'll have a phase-in approach. So the first 100 bed spaces that we want to refurbish is already in tender. The closing date is next week, Monday. Then, Honourable Chair, in terms of Swellendam, Swellendam is also one of those small correctional centres that does not comply with the new generation correctional centres in terms of the design. It has a bed space capacity of 72. At this stage, I must indicate it does not form part of the infrastructure plan in terms of repairs and renovations due to the fact that that centre has surpassed its life expectancy and it's currently beyond economical repair. So we need to look at the total refurbishment and or perhaps look at the construction of a new correctional centre. But in terms of refurbishment, it will not be feasible to renovate Swellendam. Then, Honourable Chair, in terms of, there's also a correctional centre that's closed in the former Transkei in the Amatola district with the name Namakwe. Namakwe is also one of those small correctional centres with a bed space capacity of 69. We have finalized the refurbishment project. At the stage we did achieve practical completion. At this stage, we're just busy with the snagging and anticipated final completion is set for the 15th of July 2020. Currently, as I indicated, all the construction has been done. We're just busy finalizing the in-house work that needs to be done in terms of the fitment of the locks into that facility. Then, Honourable Chair, in terms of the correctional centres in the Gauteng that's currently closed, Mtonjeni Youth Centre is situated at the Bavians management area. Currently, it's under construction. It has a bed space capacity of 640. Currently, the contract's already on site, and we anticipate to have it finalized also during the year 2022. So in terms of the centres that's currently closed, that is a feedback that I can provide at this stage. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Mkawele, are you done?
Yes, Honourable Minister, unless there are further questions. Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Okay, no, that's fine. I think the question that has not been answered is the first question from Honorable Bredenbach. Will have to get the details and revert in writing as she requested. Advocate Skosana.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Honorable Chair, Deputy Minister, and honorable members. I'll be very brief in terms of the questions asked in respect of the case backlog plan. Firstly, I just wanted to allude that Honorable Breitenbach and Honorable Horn, you are right. The case plan is about numbers and number crunching and to see what the effect and impact of the processes are. And I think one thing we've learned out of this COVID-19 experience is that all the stakeholders in the court environment is the need to consolidate and coordinate and pull together a common database that talks to cases. And I think we're getting to that space, and I'm very glad that I think Minister will be presenting to Cabinet very soon the whole project around the IJS and how we seek to use the technology to assist us in that process of case management. And I think there's a great deal of work which is underway, and the NDPP is leading a process that also seeks to look into areas of inefficiency. And Deputy Minister has basically guided in terms of how we can start pulling together into a common process so that the judiciary, the prosecution, the and the police, they can all look at the very same picture when they talk about numbers. So yesterday, we did present the numbers when we were briefing the minister in anticipation of today. And I think the view, which the guidance given was that it's important that these numbers be presented at a meeting where the collective of the functionaries are meeting, so they can basically present their own view on the case numbers, on the database, so that whatever gets communicated basically have got the buy-in and the acceptance of everybody. And then from that perspective, you are then able to say how you are starting to make a traction in terms of addressing those cases. I can say upfront that from the database managed by the department, the data in the data center, we before the lockdown, at the district court level, the case backlog stood at 28,445 in the district court. After that was by the end of March, by the 25th of March 2020. That is a day before the lockdown. As of 25th of May, a month thereafter, those backlogs have gone to 45,159 in the district court, an increase of just close to 10,000. In the regional court, the backlogs at the 25th of March stood at 27,976, which had increased to 32,176. So those basically indicate that there's been a spike in terms of the backlogs, simply because the courts from the different levels of lockdown levels have been basically undertaking a very gradual easing process. I think under level 5 there were no trials; it was only postponement, and in most instances they were accused only by AVR and also in absentia, with people being at home. And then Honorable Breitenbach, the directions, we apologize if they created kind of confusion. The directions under alert level 5 lockdown have been repealed. They are no longer there. Only directions which are there are directions under alert level 4, because the regulations for level 4 have not been repealed. Those regulations are there. So there's a new added chapter of the regulations to deal with level 3 lockdown. So we've got two sets of regulations, of directions. We've got directions for level 4, which still are applicable should any of the hotspots or any of the district or any of the province or any of the area be declared back to level 4. Those directions will become applicable. But the whole country now is under alert level 3. So the regulations which came into effect on the 2nd of June 2020 are the ones which are applicable. The ones which came into effect on the 31st of May, they are still in place, but they have not been repealed, but they'll only become applicable should there be any area in the Republic which reverts back to alert level 4. So those are the different easing process. That's why when you see the numbers and spikes in terms of these cases, this can indicate the additional work that courts are now able to upload on their roll, etc. And the NPA are keeping recent statistics in terms of the COVID-19 related matters, and I'm sure Advocate Dikok may basically give a sense of where we are there in the space, including the opportunities that basically can come in terms of the plea bargaining mechanisms, which is part of our law. And while all that the plan says is that to the extent that those avenues may become available, it's an opportune time to use those avenues. In the very same way that in the civil matters, there's an avenue for ADR and the court mediation processes so that they can basically help ease the increasing backlog across all those lines. But as I've said, these are the numbers which basically still have to be confirmed in the meetings with the judiciary, because in terms of case flow management processes, the judiciary are responsible for the case flow management and even case scheduling, basically with their participation of all the stakeholders. That's why in the direction it was very clear to say that the directives by the priority role need to be developed under the directions of the heads of the courts, in terms judicial heads of the courts, in terms of those respective areas, etc. But obviously, we'll come back with the numbers once we have met with all the stakeholders in terms of this backlog process, and at that meeting, we'll then be able to basically give a sense of where we are in terms of the implementation. There are figures. Stakeholders are looking at them, they are working on the courts, whatever, etc. And whilst I'm there, let me also mention, allude to the issue of Honorable Mufokeng. The courts, 68 courts have been closed to date, but not that today we still have 68 courts closed. That is, those are courts which are closed for 48 hours, 3 days, whatever, for purposes of decontamination, and they get open again. So we still operate on a stop and go arrangement, which is going to be part of our life as we move forward in terms of this pandemic. And as honorable members have said, we need to live with that reality, and hence the protocols which we are currently engaging with the stakeholders will help us guide, will help us regulate that new normal as it unfolds every day. But I think I have indicated what are the areas we need to cover. There was a question on in terms of the 230 cases of people who have been charged in terms of COVID-19 transgressions. They've paid admissions of guilt, and they've got criminal records in terms of the arrangement. That matter, the Minister of Police have also referred it to our minister, and I think it's a matter under consideration that there's basically a process underway to see what can be done as an immediate intervention on the amendment of the Criminal Procedure Act, and there's a bill which is currently being worked on in terms of the Judicial Matters Amendment Act to see whether there's an opportunity to address that matter. Whilst at the same time, the process of the review of the Criminal Procedure Act is gaining momentum, and the minister will present to cabinet where we are with that process, etc. There was a question from Honorable Horn in terms of the extent to which the department wished to absorb the budget cuts which have been announced, and even environments which basically have been pronounced. We have arranged in the department a planning session, a virtual planning session on Monday and Tuesday, the 29th and the 30th. That planning session was supposed to have taken place this past Monday because it's a planning session informed by the need to revise or to adapt the strategic plan and the APP in line with the COVID-19 realities arising from the instruction we received from the Presidency and the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. We then thought it wise that we await that review process so that we're also going to be informed by the actual figures that are going to come from today's budget speech, from today's supplementary budget addressed by the Minister of Finance. We are engaging with the DG of National Treasury. We know what the figures are looking like, but obviously in terms of the necessary protocols, whatever, all those remain kind of proposals and estimates until Parliament has basically endorsed those changes. Then we are able to work to drill them down in terms of the actual plan. So we should be able, when we submit our revised plan, whatever, to present to our minister, who will present your committee, how those impacts are going to be, those cuts are going to be absorbed, and which areas are going to be basically preserved as we sustain service in the courts. And I think the cuts did not come as drastic as was initially intended, because there have been engagement with the Treasury, and I think there have been an acknowledgement that we need to retain, to keep the courts running in the midst of all the problems and challenges that we face, etc. I've addressed the issue of Honorable Mufokeng, and I think we'll then, I think the part of us having to develop a breakdown of the corruption cases ever since in the past 5 whatever years, whatever is a matter that I think can be part of that adaptation of the figures, but also NPM may wish to say something around that, etc. I must just say that those were the questions that I think I've covered, and to the extent that I may still left something out, I can still revert to them, etc. Honorable Juan, the case backlog plan is a work in progress. As I've said, there are structures which are established by the Chief Justice, to which all the functionaries participate, and they've started to look at the ways and means through which they should be able to address the spikes which are basically happening sharply in terms of other courts. I can just say as I close that in terms of the stats that we have, it shows that in terms of the district courts, there are quite a number of cases. The spike is very huge in Blue Downs Magistrate Court, because there have been quite a substantive slow down in terms of dealing with matters there arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of regional court, there have been some high spikes in the Durban Regional Court in terms of the matters, but these are moving targets, and as and when we confirm these figures through all the participation of all the stakeholders, we should be able to confirm or present a more kind of credible stats that the committee can basically judge or measure the impact of the plan on. Thanks for the opportunity, and I'm sure the Minister and the DM and the NDP will further add on those measures they have left out. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Minister, may I proceed? Honourable Chair?
Yes, you can.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, I will deal with a couple of issues that have been raised, and Advocate de Kock will take one or two issues as well. On the issue relating to the breakdown of cases in respect of corruption, what we can say is that there are no cases on the court roll. There are no corruption cases on the court rolls that are longer than 10 years old. But certainly there will be cases in the DPCI space under investigation. But with regard to the breakdown of other figures that we were asked, we ask your indulgence, Chair, that we provide that in writing, because we don't have those figures at the moment. And if there are any specific cases regarding prosecutors or magistrates that have been promoted where cases are outstanding, it would be useful to have those details, so both we as well as the Magistrates Commission, as appropriate, can look into those matters. And I will leave it to Advocate de Kock to deal with the other matters raised, Honourable Chair. Advocate de Kock.
Thank you very much, NDPP. Thank you very much, Chair, and honourable members, for the further opportunity. I think generally, just on the overcrowding issue, although there wasn't a specific question on this to the prosecution, our approach is one of balancing the interests of society, the interests of victims, the nature of the offences, and the rights of accused against each other. In order for us to come to a decision that's in the interest of justice. And so we try to create a distinction when people are arrested, which cases are the cases that are of a non-violent nature, where life is not threatened, and those cases where accused can then be released on warning. We try our best to release accused on warning, so that we don't unnecessarily refer accused persons to our correctional facilities. So, of course, that is happening on a daily basis in our courts, and our prosecutors are doing the best they can to scrutinize each and every case in terms of Section 62F of the provisions of the CPA, where we try to ensure that accused persons could be released under the supervision of a correctional official, and of course also the Section 63A applications in terms of those accused persons where bail was fixed and they are in the facilities, and then to bring those accused back so that the court can reconsider those bail amounts and ideally get those accused released from prisons. From the information that we have and that the reports we've received today, there has been a measure of success in reducing that category of remand detainees. So that's just generally, Chair. On the issue of the plea bargaining, the plea and sentence agreements, it is correct that we utilize plea and sentence agreements as a tool to ensure that there's a speedy finalization of cases. So we believe that under the present circumstances that we are operating within the criminal justice system, this is a tool that we could possibly use better. And so it is on the statute book. There are stringent requirements that the prosecution must comply with. One of them being that we must consult with the victims. Two, we must consult with the investigating officers. And we obviously can only deal with matters where accused are represented by lawyers. We cannot engage in a plea and sentence agreement with an accused that's underrepresented. Furthermore, it's a requirement that all plea and sentence agreements are in writing, must be done in writing, and then these plea and sentence agreements are presented to the court. So no matter what we decide between ourselves and the defense, ultimately the court becomes the arbiter of whether it's in the interest of justice to confirm what the prosecution and the defense have agreed upon. And then once the court has confirmed that, the accused will be convicted, and the court will then visit the provisions contained in the document in terms of sentence to determine whether it's a just sentence that the prosecution and the defense have agreed upon. So the legislation creates the safeguards that's required for us to ensure that the interest of justice is always served when we conclude a plea and sentence agreements in our courts. So what we mean by when we say we want to ensure the optimum use of plea and sentence agreements, we are simply saying that this is a tool available to us as the prosecution and the system to ensure that there's a speedy finalization of a case under these times of COVID-19 and when the courts are struggling to finalize cases. Furthermore, this statute has been on the statute book, or this provision has been on the statute book since 2001, and the prosecutors are well versed in terms of how to deal with these matters, and they only happen under the supervision of senior public prosecutors and senior state advocates in DPP offices, and only where the NDPP has authorized prosecutors to do it. So we are very satisfied that this work happens under strict supervision in all our courts. But we firmly believe that there's still an opportunity to do more of this. It's still dependent, of course, on whether the defense lawyers are prepared to engage with us and whether or not the bulk of the cases which are with legal aid, whether legal aid is prepared to engage with the prosecution. So from my point of view, it's something I think we should encourage. The law makes provision for it, and it's really an opportunity for us to utilize these provisions much better. I think the acting DG has dealt with the issue of the backlogs substantially, but I want to confirm that the increase in the backlogs is not as a result of COVID-19 arrests. The increase is in the backlogs, as the acting DG has explained, is largely as a result of the impact of the state of disaster and the impact of the lockdown on the courts and the limitation that we have as prosecutors to be able to effectively deal with cases in our courts. And so now in the stage that we are in level 3, with the priority cases that we are dealing with, of course, there's an improvement in the finalization of cases. But during the first phase of the lockdown, effectively, finalized cases were very few. It was very limited. And that, of course, must have had a substantial impact on the backlog figures. And so the strategies going forward, we need to look at how we are going to ensure that we can quickly finalize cases still. It's going to be a challenge because this state of disaster has had a major impact on the functioning of the courts. Chair, I think that the last question I need to deal with is the question of whether or not there's uniformity in the way in which prosecutors are dealing with cases in our courts. In this regard, at the commencement of the lockdown period, a circular was issued from the MPA head office to all directors of public prosecutions in terms of how we are expected to manage cases on our court rolls as the prosecution. And then when we achieved, or when we went to level 4 and level 3, a directive was issued by the NDPP as well to ensure that there's consistency in the way in which cases are prosecuted and managed throughout the country. I think what is happening in our courts is that the management of the courts are under the leadership of the judiciary. And so to the extent that you find different practices in various courts, it's because of a different approach by the leadership of the judiciary in those particular courts. And so, of course, as participants in the litigation, the prosecution is but a participant in the litigation, and in criminal litigation, we of course lead the litigation. We are still dependent on what the judiciary determines in terms of how the cases must be dealt with. So from our point of view, we try our best to ensure that there's consistency throughout the country, but we are always dependent on the decisions that are made by the judiciary on a case-by-case and on a court-by-court basis. Chair, I think that those covers the remaining areas that were outstanding. If there's anything that I left out, I'm happy to respond to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Honourable Chair. Those are the responses from the NPA.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. I think there was also one issue that relates to the 19,000 that they are causing havoc in the Western Cape. Those released during this dispensation. I've just been advised by the department that they have been responding to the matter in the Western Cape. Maybe they may just need for it to be widely publicized and so forth, but there have been other newspaper outlets that have carried the response of DCS. And thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mofokeng.
Chairperson, I think I will forward on the issue of the outstanding cases, because I raised it, that I can confirm that we have cases of 2008. In those other cases, some were finalized this year, early in the year. And I can tell you there are those cases. And I will hand over to Deputy Minister John Jeffries. I've done so, because these are the cases when people look at us. They are saying we deal with others, we leave others. And we are criticized because you find it's people that have been in high offices or high ranking. And so let us be fair and deal with cases in an equal way. If we are not sure at the moment, which can be possible, I will request that you go back to your office, collate onto your stories, and check on cases of corruptions and cases that have been outstanding, especially even those of fraud and robbery. You check, and then you can tell us that are we following or not, because we are definitely following. Thank you very much.
Honorable Drachens.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question related to the breakdown of the 19,000. May I have that in written form, please? The provincial breakdown, apologies, interpreter's error. The breakdown in terms of provinces of the 19,000. May I please receive the answer in written form? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. One of the issues that I think we need to emphasize, Minister, we took a decision as a committee that the amendment, the Judicial Amendment Act that relates to the COVID cases, we need that to be done at least by July. If you are not in a position to do that by July, maybe we can work together in ensuring that we have a committee bill, because we think that is very urgent.
Okay, not the Chairperson.
No, thank you very much, Minister. Thank you for the information that you have given us, and thank you to your delegation, the delegation from Correctional Services, Justice, and the NPA. Thank you very much. I think Honorable Janji and his subcommittee, we always owe you an apology, because we always promise to give you some space so that you can follow up on correctional services issues, but we have been having a scheduling problem with Parliament, hence the problems that were raised by Honorable Breitenbach. But we think that it's very urgent that this subcommittee should be given that space to drill more on the issues raised by correctional services. Honorable members, thank you very much. Can we go to the second item on the agenda? Minister and the delegation, if you want to be released, you can be released. We won't detain you further.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson, for the opportunity. Hope to further interact with the committee on many other issues. Thank you. We will depart the meeting.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, we received a briefing from the Public Protector on the organizational structure of the Public Protector of South Africa. We promised that we will schedule a discussion on this organizational structure before we recommend to Parliament. So we have put this matter so that we can finalize it as soon as possible. So can we discuss this issue, consideration of the report of the organizational structure of the Public Protector of South Africa in terms of Section 3, subsection 11 of the Public Protector Act 23 of 1994, dated 24 June. 2020. Is there a person who thinks that we should support the organizational structure as proposed by the public protector? That is where we should start.
Chairperson?
Honorable Mafuke?
I think we should support it with those amendments, and we should be sure that they have been incorporated as we made proposals on what we agreed on.
Okay. So the amendments are as proposed by the Minister of Finance, that the structure is supported by the National Treasury on the basis that they must stick to the baseline budget and they must prioritize funded posts. Any seconder to Honorable Mfuke?
Seconded, Chair.
Seconded by Honorable Mohammed. Anyone who disagrees?
Chair, it's Werner Horn.
Honorable Horn?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily disagreeing on that. Obviously, as is the tradition, we will reserve our position. I want to, however, just advocate that if we look at the contents of paragraph 3 of the draft report, which talks to the duty of the public protector to table a document setting out the determination regarding remuneration allowances and other conditions of service, that we in the report make it clear that since this is a new organizational structure, we expect of the public protector to table such a document. Her argument, colleagues would recall during the briefing, was that no, remuneration stays the same as in the past, but the fact is, if you embark on a whole organizational review, it does not necessarily follow that remuneration stay the same. The levels of appointment of some officials may differ from in the past. So I think as the custodians of the Public Protector Act, we must, as part of the report, require or request that that document be tabled with the National Assembly, at least within 14 days after our report is tabled before the House.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Horn. Is there a seconder of that of that edition?
Yes, it's Glynis, and I second.
Is there anyone who opposes?
Yeah, Chair. I kan maar op die draad sit soos altyd, ja.
Yay, Richard.
Honorable. Honorable Janji, are you the seconding Honorable Prettenbach, I guess?
Yeah. I don't have a problem with what Honorable Horn is saying, except, Chair, to make the point. I mean, it's a moot point now. The title of the presentation by the Public Protector is Organizational Review. But in essence, what they presented to us is not organizational review, it's an adjustment of their structure. So when you speak about organizational review, you have to deal with your macro structure and make changes. And there are no changes in the macro structure of the Public Protector at all. All she did was just to adjust in a way. She shifted seats in a bus. The bus is still the same. So they're just different seats. You're no longer going to sit here, you sit there. So I don't know if you can still call that organizational review, and to an extent invoke what Honorable Horn is raising. Hence I'm saying I don't have a problem with that is raising, which is correct. But I don't know if what we have received constitute an organizational restructure, because in my own organizational development exposure, it doesn't. What we're dealing with is an adjustment of the kind of the same structure, but let me pause there. I'm not opposed to what he's saying.
Honorable members, since I think there is no violent opposition, I think Honorable Janji's point is valid, but he is not opposed to what Honorable Horn is saying. Can I suggest that we still integrate what Honorable Horn is saying and put the report now? Is there anyone who disagrees with the report as amended?
We all agree except Horn and Clayton's Breitenbach.
Okay, I take it that the report has been agreed to. Thank you very much. Now let's go to the point raised by Honorable Breitenbach on the housekeeping matters. This has been a very difficult time, honorable members. If you remember, one of the issues that necessitated the last changes in our program was that we got an instruction that all programs should start after the house sittings. So meetings that were supposed to be in the morning were all expected to be scheduled after the house sittings. And there are limited slots that we all compete for. And these are the slots that we have received. And bearing in mind that, honorable members, part of what we have, we would want to have is to free up space for the second term to concentrate on legislation that will be coming. We know that we already have a constitutional court deadline for the drug and trafficking, the cannabis judgment, which must be done before September. We have the 3 bills that are coming, the GBV bills that might be coming around August, July, August, that would need to process. So we've got quite a number of legislations that we will be very busy in the second half of the year. And we have, I think I do take the point raised by Honorable Breitenbach, but we have always, we have stuck to the dates given to us by Parliament, because Parliament recognizes Friday as a working day, and unless it is a holiday. Generally, what has been the norm, it might not be the correct one, but what has been the norm is that even Honorable Mohammed does that when it is he submits an apology, and apology is noted, and even other people. But I do take the point that has been raised, but I think for now it is generally beyond us. The times have been given to us. This week we got the 6 o'clock meetings because we had sittings of the National Assembly. I'm told also there's going to be a sitting on Friday of the National Assembly. It is only after the sittings that the committees can sit. But I have been advised also that Parliament is no more adjourning on Friday. I'm told that is going to be a debate on Tuesday. So I think it's that is the context that our discussion should take place.
May I say something?
Honorable Glenis Breitenbach.
Thank you. I accept perfectly, Mr. Chair, that we're working in difficult times and that we have a job to do and we need to get work done. I'm afraid that if we have to sit on Fridays, specifically at 6 o'clock, that is the start of the Sabbath for me. I will not be available on Friday nights at 6 o'clock. And so I will submit an apology every Friday night at 6 o'clock. So, my colleagues may or may not be available. I don't know. That's up to them. But I cannot be at a portfolio committee meeting on a Friday at 6 o'clock. It is the time of the Sabbath, and there are certain traditions that need to be followed. And I'm afraid that I just can't be available at 6 o'clock on a Friday night. So I'm not being difficult, and I don't expect the world to stop for me, but I will not be available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Breitenbach. Other members?
Chairperson.
Honorable Juan?
No, it's actually Self.
Hello?
James Self that's speaking.
Oh, yes, Honorable Self, how are you? I'm
very well, thank you, and yourself. Chairperson, I think you have made the point, but and I accept the strictures of Parliament and the way that it operates at the moment. But I do think that there's a difference between working on a Friday and working on a Friday night. And I do have the greatest degree of sympathy with the Honourable Breitenbach. And I think, with respect, that this matter should be discussed with the Chair of Chairs, because I'm sure that some sort of an arrangement could be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members?
Chair, it's Werner Horn. I just want to repeat the plea, and really it's a plea based on an agreement we reached as a committee, and that was that we would try and fix programs for the term, and if not for the term, then at least for the month or for 2 weeks in advance. It is so that we largely housebound, but all of us have other responsibilities apart from our legislative duties. And in order for us to plan our own diaries, I think the agreed upon practice of knowing in good time when we will meet really should be reverted to, despite the fact that we're meeting on a virtual platform. And I think the let's say the theory behind that is that we should be readily available, and our travel is much less, and so on. And that's all true. And in addition to that, and I know the Honourable Nivo Drachen has also inquired about it quite a number of times, in order for us to be properly prepared, not only is a good program a necessity. Sorry, do you hear me? Not only is a good program a necessity, but also if we know what the points on the agenda is, we can start preparing, despite not necessarily already having presentations. So I think that's another very important aspect in respect of a busy second term, as you have alluded to. Thank you.
Chairperson?
Honorable Mfuke?
I think I will agree that you need to go and consult with the Chair of Chairs, but also maybe we have to consider that on Friday, we can start at 8. And by the time it's 11 o'clock, we are done. If there's any other business that comes from 12 o'clock, which most meetings start at 10, we might find that we are done. If we can start utilizing the morning, 8 o'clock, that will serve us well, so that we cut this business also off Friday, because later it's going to be a very serious challenge. I want to suggest that you go back on that consultation, but with the baggie of the morning, starting very early.
Okay. No, thank you, honorable members. If I may ask, Honorable Mohammed, you said there's a sitting on Tuesday. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a preliminary notice that I got, or indication I got. I haven't seen the formal notice yet. Yes, Chair. There is a sitting on Tuesday afternoon because there are business that will be processed on that day. For example, the notice on the remuneration of the human rights and in the public protector that we dealt with as a committee will be on the order paper that day. I think it's the 30th of June, yeah, next week.
Okay. No, I think, first of all, I think we should take Honorable Horn's point of a predictable program. If you remember, honorable members, we had drawn a program for the whole term before, immediately after the first term, which was changed, I think, quite a few occasions, because of the interventions from Parliament. Part of that intervention is when they created the 16 committees to focus on COVID-19, and then there was generally a lot of disruption, but generally it's what we had agreed on, that we need to have a predictable program. Possibly we must have a term program that is going to be, it can only be changed on serious, through serious interventions. It must not be chopped and changed, because once we do that, we will lose even a moral authority to make the departments, in fact, to make the departments account on time, because once we change the program, we chop and change the program, then they will start blaming us and hide their own issues. So I think that is the point that we should wholeheartedly take and ensure that also on our side. I know members, for instance, in the ANC, some of them serve in more than 4 or 5 committees. Members have got other responsibilities that should be taken into consideration. I think we should improve from what we have been doing. The next term should be far better than this term. I think that one we should focus. We should agree to. And then secondly, take the 2 points. One, in fact, it's 1 point. I think it was raised by Honorable Horn, seconded by Honorable Mufokeng, that we interact with the House Chair, look at 2 possibilities. One is a possibility of still be accommodated on Friday morning, or we look at after hours, after 4, which will be the last time on Tuesday after the sitting, and because we think that should be the last day that we meet as a committee, unless the parliamentary program changes again. But it was going to be the last meeting, so we would look at Tuesday after the sitting, or on Friday morning. But the challenge generally that we have to have meetings before the sittings is that you find that sometimes you end up pressurizing people to finish because the House is going to start. But we would explore all of those issues. Is it agreeable, honorable members?
Yeah.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you very much, honorable members, and thank you for your patience and for your constructive engagement as usual. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Say donkey, Glennis. Say donkey.
Thank you, Chair. Well,
Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Tomorrow, sure.
Sure.
So there's no caucus tomorrow.
It's at 10. There is a caucus.
Yeah.